The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
So without further ado, today's speaker is Ken Sullivan. He is a professor at Arizona State University and has tremendous experience in procurement, project delivery, services. And with that said, Ken, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jake. I'll just share my screen here. So I was asked just to share just a few of the advanced procurement practices or some things we've seen along the ways, just a little bit different. And maybe the word advanced is a bit of a stretch, but just some best practices that maybe in addition to some of the CPE guidelines and best practices that are a little bit more challenging potentially to implement because they're more innovative or different than what a lot of groups currently do. So my name is Ken Sullivan. We're part of Simplar. I'm a professor here at ASU. We do research. We have a consultancy as well, org change. We do training. And we do a lot of different things. One of the main ones we do is procurement, product delivery on supply chain issues, but we're basically helping organizations transform and become more efficient and more effective in how they do different aspects, including procurement and how they deliver their projects and services. Our core tenet is helping organizations, buying organizations, become what we call a client or a customer of choice, where you're a preferred client of the vendor community. And we've developed some best practices around that. We also do it on the vendor side, becoming a higher performing service provider. And we do a lot of other activities as well in benchmarking and talent development and whatnot. We've run procurements on over 3,000 buys. A little over 15 billion in spend across the years, and we've been doing our research and our implementation in all different business sectors. A lot of our work right now is actually in IT. We came out of the built environment, facilities, and business sectors, and kind of expanded everything from there. Just some of our current recent partners, just over the last couple of years. So a good smattering of public, private, large, small, all different types of activities, and really everyone's buying things. So a lot of the problems are consistent across organizations, regardless of type, structure, and funding mechanism. Some basic ideas here. So some things we've been able to prove: performance on a good or a service or a project has not actually been proven to statistically correlate to cost. So more money doesn't necessarily get you higher performance. It can, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to that. And so trying to tie performance to, more cost or a better contract or a more robust specification or requirement or a different delivery method or a specific software system, there actually is no correlation that we or others have been able to show or prove. Performance has been proven by many to highly correlate to the capability of the people actually doing the work. And so one of the things that our processes focus on is identifying the true capability and expertise of the individuals and the team that will be providing the service or the project that you're trying to procure. Sometimes you're also procuring a product or a technology, and that's also part of the buying process. But there's usually smaller differences, or those are more specific to a need versus the performance difference you can see across individuals and teams that the vendor will be providing. Also, we've seen, and this is more recent, that performance on our procurements has been proven to highly correlate to how ready our internal client or owner team is for the adoption of the service. And that can be something simple or something more complex. And this is usually, you'll see a more robust response to readiness from a complex project or something that's going to change how your organization does its function. So the people really are the key. So as we improve our procurement processes and look to advance our best practices, we're looking at people. And what we've found is that the ability to have innovation, to minimize risk, to create value, to minimize cost, all of these are directly linked to the capability of the people that are trying to be innovative and foresee and minimize and mitigate risk and to create value and look for ways to reduce the cost. So your ability to do that on a project will not exceed the capability of the people that you hire. So if someone's really good at identifying opportunities to reduce the cost, then you have a good chance of having good cost reduction on your project. But if that skill isn't contained within the team you hire, then you're left to your own internal capability, and there's more expectation, risk, and responsibility on the internal client or user team to create the value on the project versus leveraging the value that can be created out of the vendor team. But that people become your level setter for how that's possible. And the reality is that in a given moment of time, there's a limited pool of highly capable experts. And that's going to vary, like when you actually release solicitation. It could vary by location if there's a geographic constraint to what you're doing. And obviously it varies by market and sector and technology. And what we've seen is that sometimes organizations can underestimate how expensive it truly is to work with an average or low performing vendor. There's a lot of tangential and peripheral costs that come into play if you're working with a vendor who is not necessarily performing at the level that you would expect. And then there's a contract enforcement or a value extraction function or management skill that begins to be employed by organizations. And that the use of that can actually scare away higher performing teams because you seem to be a client that's difficult to work for. And so there's this double-edged sword phenomena that can happen if we're not hiring the right people. So one of the key thinking aspects for our approach is the realization that organizations, clients, and buyers are actually in competition with each other for the same few limited pool of skilled personnel available at a single moment of time within a single service or good or project skill set that you're trying to hire or procure. And so you're trying to differentiate yourself from other potential customers from that vendor's perspective to look more attractive, so they will send their best people to compete and do the work that you're hiring them to do. And that becomes the core idea of becoming a client of choice. And so that client of choice or a customer of choice is that your suppliers, your vendors want to work for you over their other customers. They want to send their best teams to work on your projects and your services. And that's a big one. You have to watch out for the bait and switch. So the procurement structure and the delivery structure or the engagement structure, that framework has to be conducive to the allocation of expertise from the vendor community. If your work is more attractive, then they will spend more time putting together a quality proposal specific to the current need, and it will increase your rate of competition. And we've seen that regularly in our efforts to improve even just the solicitation documents for an organization that increases the level of competition and the number of vendors interested in pursuing the work. Your internal people know how to work with high performing teams. That's a longer skill set, and that's not necessarily a procurement problem. And you're prepared to bring those teams in. And that's an order of readiness issues. But we can't just trick vendors. We actually have to change. We can look good for a couple, but the market quickly figures out who we really are. So our experience has been. And so trying to become a client of choice, three of these things in terms of how we procure, how we deliver, and then how we measure are actually contained within one of our processes that we call expertise, expertise-driven product delivery, XPD. That's XPD, expertise-driven product delivery. So we've done this thousands of times. It's a core procurement model. It's most people consider it advanced. It's usually different than what most organizations are doing. We attempt to maximize openness, fairness, and transparency in the creation of value. And we're trying basically to be a good client in our behaviors. We've had great success with this. We've tweaked it a lot over the years. We've done work in many countries, but goals are to minimize change order rates, delay rates, minimize how much effort you have to spend as a client, managing and working with your vendors, increase customer satisfaction, of course. And then also speed up the total time of procurement. And so in our last few years, we've gotten a little bit more efficient. And so we've been able to cut procurement time down by 50 to 75% as measured by our partners, their internal measurements. And so that's getting faster. How can we do highly accurate and good selection procurements with less effort and in a more effective way? So we have some content and some free info available on our website. So if you want to get more depth into some of those, this is just one of our white papers we have, but it'll walk through some of the details of our processes and our best practices. But just from a high level, there's three basic linkages and phases to how we approach a procurement and the delivery of the selected service or project. And I'm going to focus on just selection today. But the first thing is obviously selection. And so you gather proposals, you'll look at the prices, sometimes you look at the schedule or the time allotment, and then you'll look at the past performance as measured by previous clients in a structured quantitative fashion of the individual personnel that will be assigned to your project and any products that you'll be using. And like, so for example, if you're procuring an IT system, you'll want to know clients who are similar to you, similar organizations in function and size, who have also used this system as sold to them by the vendor you're considering, and the performance of that vendor and that system at that site. And we actually incorporate that into demos for IT as well. There's two core written submissions, which is a risk assessment and a value assessment. And these are different than how most people have seen them. These are very short documents, even on large projects. We've procured projects over $1 billion for a single contract, but keep it simple. The goal of the procurement is to differentiate the competitors. It's not to solve all your problems. And so we recommend no more than 2 pages for each submission that you require for your procurement. And in our process, we actually keep those as anonymous submissions. And so the procurement professional will know, of course, who is submitting, but for the written submissions, for the actual proposal documents that we think of traditionally, those are anonymous. And so there's no markings, there's no logos, there's no indication of past project names that can give away who they are, no person or site names. And so the evaluators don't know which vendor's proposal they're evaluating. They don't even know who submitted when it first starts. We've tested at the next level recently with COVID, where all the interviews have been, for the last year and a half or so, interviews have been virtual primarily. And so we've actually had anonymous interviews, which has been interesting. And so to truly create a fair and level playing field. And this actually wasn't our idea. This came out of the vendor community. They have this notion that sometimes clients have favorites, and the procurement's not always completely fair. And it's sometimes a tilted deck, or the evaluators already kind of know who they want, and they're just going through the procurement process as an administrative function to hire who they were going to hire anyway. When you make it anonymous, it shows the vendors you're trying to be a very good client and you truly want the best. You're actually looking for that best deal, that best value. And it's a powerful marketing tool to attract more vendors and show that you want to be a good customer, and the best service with the best team and a competitive price is going to win the project. We also have a unique interview process. And after we select, we have a specific way of clarifying and partnering with our vendors that I'm not going to talk about much today. And the contract award's made after that. For selection, so just a few highlights. Using anonymous proposals is a highly recommended best practice. There will be pushback in your organization, especially on your technical side. They think they know typically all the best people and all the best services. We've proven this not to be true. It's hard to know who's available in a single moment of time from which company, and they move companies and the people move around. And so a lot of times we'll see, technical leads or internal experts from on a buyer side, client side, who overestimate their knowledge of the marketplace and the robustness of the current capabilities and technologies that exist. And it can be a tremendous detriment to the organization, but they're usually very confident. A lot of deference can be given to them, and it can be very impactful to the overall success of the procurement. So the anonymous nature is valuable in lots of ways, but there can be pushback from some people. And typically, we help navigate that pushback and push through with the logic and the best practice. Two main deliverables here in terms of written portions or risk and value plans. And I think we probably talked about that before at CP, but these are some best practices that we found, but we're really focused on risk the vendor does not control is really the main highlight. I know it says control and don't control, but what can keep the vendor from doing a good job is a key indicator of expertise, because they will, one definition of expert is they know what their risk is. And so they don't really have any risk in the delivery of their function because they're an expert. They know how to do it. What can cause an expert not to be able to do the job they want to do is risk they don't control. And so we've found that high-performing teams know what can keep them from being successful, what they need others to do, what environmental factors or regulatory factors or uncertainties exist. They have the experience, they have the mental capability to foresee those things, and they can lay them out. And there's certain things typically they can do to either minimize the occurrence of the risk happening, or if it does happen, minimize its impact based upon their expertise. And that skill set is something that we've measured and defined over the years is uniquely correlated to people with high levels of capability and expertise. Average and low performers typically don't have the ability to look at risk they do not control, and they don't really think that way. Value added is another one. And the skill we're looking for here is the ability to, for the vendor to place themselves in the client's shoes and basically say, if I were the client, if I was the organization buying my service or my product, what would I do differently than what I've been asked to do in the statement of work or the solicitation or the spec? And so it's a lot of times we'll see where a client, and they're just people, right? And they're doing the best they can to write a scope and requirements. And they may not have done a certain project in 5 years or a service, or they may never have ever done it personally, even the organization might have done it in the past. And so they're just doing their best. Whereas a vendor that provides that service or that capability, they may be doing this every day of the week for clients very similar to you. And so they may actually know what you may want to think about or things you might have missed because they've seen others just like you in the past, and they can think that way. And that's the value added plan. We have to teach the vendors to think that way we're looking for, and that's part of what we help do as well. Here's a very generic evaluation model, but you'll have total cost, interviews, risk plans, value plans, past performance of the companies, and then past performance of key personnel. And we typically use a linear normalized curve. And the main thing is, can we create differentiation based upon the opportunities the vendors have to differentiate themselves from their competitors? That's one of our core goals. And so that's the goal, is if we have a clear procurement, there's a clear best value or best solution within our budget. And then we compare prices. There's cost competitive ranges. That's pretty standard. So it may not always be the cheapest price, but it will be competitive. So I have 2 more minutes here on my clock, Jake, if that's okay. But I just wanted to do a quick one. This is the Dallas Independent School District. This was a case study we did, or a project we did. I have as a case study here. So this is a good example. It's very simple. This is roofing, very, very simple. So it could be something complex or simple. You can use these concepts anywhere. So they've been one of the big issues in this part of the country is hail, and so roofing systems take a lot of damage. And they had a few hundred roofs they had to look over at the school district, and they've been using a system for a long time. It was a foam-based system, very good in hail, good insulation qualities. The problem with it was hard to install. It came out as a binary liquid, and you had to have a certain level of skill to basically the crews are spraying this material on the roof deck, and to spray something and keep it free of air voids and smooth is a high level of skill. And the main facility director had been doing this for 10 or so years, 15 years, had a lot of success, had a handful of crews that he knew could do it from different contractors, and they rotated the work and had a nice little process going. He retired. A new director came in, looked at the roofing program, and realized this was potentially an opportunity for improvement. They loved the system. They'd used it for many years, but they thought they could openly compete in low bid using a specification for the product and get a better price than what they were getting from their traditional, performance selected vendors. So they developed the specification, technical details, went to low bid, and the system they had been using for many years with great success all of a sudden began to fail across the district. And these roofs are an average of 2 to 3 years old. And they're not supposed to look like the moon. They're supposed to look flat and clean and even. And so this is just a sign of poor construction quality. They installed it incorrectly, even though the specification laid out how to do it and all the requirements were there, and the inspectors signed everything off. But after a year or two, you start to see some of the true capability of the performance. So they ended up banning the system. They said the system's bad, it doesn't work, even though it had worked for the previous 10 or 15 years. So they banned the system. And then the next thing they do is they said, well, the solution to solving this is spend more money. So they started spending more money on more expensive, more traditional systems that are more common across the country. And they had similar or worse performance results, and it wasn't good at hail. So they were kind of in a pickle. And so they spent more, that didn't work. Now this whole cycle, this is taking like a decade. They end up coming to our group, and we did some research and said, let's just make this a procurement problem. There's lots of different systems out there. And we laid out the goals for the program: just increase the performance, minimize maintenance, make it cost competitive. And the first pilot of this was there's 9 projects, about 500,000 square feet, and their budget was $5 million. So we laid it all out. We ran the 9 projects. 6 of the 9 were awarded to the highest ranked contractor, considering performance and price. We did put some rules in based upon the policy preferences of the district and the city. So no one contractor could get more than 33% of the dollars of the total work, and then no one roofing system, no one manufacturer could receive more than 60% of the dollars. And we were open to different systems for different types of buildings. And so one of the first projects we had, the one that won it was someone they were about to blacklist. They thought they were so bad. And we've seen this a lot, but what happens is contractors, and this as an example, but all vendors, they have different levels of skilled capability inside their company. They have really good project managers, they have average project managers, and they have low skilled project managers, good technicians, average and low skilled. And so they had just never sent their best teams to work for the district before, because they were, a hard client to work for. But now they were saying their best teams, and so they were much more competitive. So here's an evaluation matrix. So you can see a more robust matrix, a real one. So money, risk plan, we measured the warranty, the schedule, and then we looked at the contractor's performance and their team, the actual team they were going to send to install, and then the manufacturer, the product, the actual system that they were proposing to install on a specific building. And we ran this on across the 9 projects. So 9 projects, 4 different contractors won the jobs. There was 3 different systems awarded in terms of the roofing systems. The budget was $4.8 million. Total awards was $4.2. We were able to procure 2 more additional projects with the savings, 13% under budget, and the average warranty length was 19 years. And so here's just a breakdown of this is just data soup. But basically what this shows is the low bid doesn't always win, and performance isn't correlated to price. Price is important. There's a value proposition, so it's not irrelevant. They must be price competitive, but if someone is 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% more expensive, or something this small, even 10% more expensive, is that worth a 20% jump in potential performance? And those are some procurement decisions you'll have to make with your clients and your budgets to see what that ratio can be. But to assume that paying more is better is not always true. And for many of these, the low bidder was also the highest performer. And so this mark here across the top is the performance level measured. And then the highlighted squares or the highlighted blue text are the ones that actually ended up winning it. And there's, again, a balancing based upon who could only win so much work. So the main findings, it came in under budget. They spent a lot less effort managing these vendors than they had on previous projects because they just hire performers. They need less oversight. Everyone was happy. And we actually went back 4 years later and measured it again. And there was not a single leak on any building that this process was implemented on. So high performance. So in conclusion, performance and value is contained within the people doing the work. The procurement process, if it can focus on the competition of the people and any key products, marketing can be dangerous. Price is not typically correlated to performance, and risk and value and past performance can be considered in a more specific way in our buying process. And if you want to learn more, there's some resources available at simplar.com, and I will end it there.
All right, Ken, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Normally at this point in time, we split up into our virtual peer groups and have discussions about what we saw or what different things that we may have seen from that. Given the size of the audience today and encourage everybody to interact with this, let's go ahead and stay together and let's open this up to Q&A for Ken here this morning. Anybody have any questions or comments for Ken over the next few minutes? Victor, I see your hand up. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted. It looks like something amazing, but you're muted.
And I made a note here. I would not go into 2022 with hearing that once, and now I got it over with. So thank you very much, Ken. Thank you for a great presentation. You had stated that buyers are in competition to attract the same experts, and much like when we are training the suppliers on how we want them to turn in their proposal to make themselves stand out more, what are some tips for buyers to create a more attractive solicitation to get those experts from that limited pool?
Yeah, so I'll put a plug in here for CPE. I've become a believer in CPE. I mean, their RFP templates, they have been doing some of the research to really look at what do vendors like to see, how do they like it organized. And so, especially in today's market, in a lot of sectors, there's so much opportunity. If a solicitation comes in and it's just confusing, hard to read, and they have 3 more similar to it, and they only have time to put out 2 proposals, then you're going to not even get the proposal in the first place, right? So then you're hopeful for geography or name recognition to help drive competition. So I think it's the solicitation is your first impression, and just the way it looks, because there's usually 1 or 2 administrative personnel that are sorting through the bid opportunities, right? They're on the servers, they're on the sites, and they're looking at the information. One of the things that we've seen, I believe CPE recommends this as well, and Jake and Brian, you can help me out here, is to put your scope of needs, like what you're really asking to do, right on that first page or the first couple pages. I see a lot of solicitations from organizations, and you won't even know what they're trying to buy until like page 50. So that's not, little things like that make a difference, because the decisions to pursue a project are happening so quick with such little information that just the cleaner that solicitation is can immediately increase your competition. The next thing is I did a research. It was not like a super fancy, like high-tech statistical study, but we did a simple survey, and depending on the industry, 70 to 95% of vendors, after reading a solicitation, think they know who the client already wants to hire, because they're seeing their competitors over and over and over again. And they know which of their competitors might have already talked to your people and helped put the proposal together, or not the RFP together, and the scope and the needs. And so when you create a cleaner scope of work in an anonymous environment, that also lets the vendors know if they have a fair shot at winning it, then they're also more likely to pursue it. So that's more attractive as well. So those are two. I mean, I could keep talking. I'm going to run out of time here, but those are some things. It's just how it looks and how open you are to anyone winning it immediately makes you more attractive, at least from a procurement standpoint. Now, if they win a job with you and have to actually work with you every day, that's a totally different conversation than trying to get them to want to work for you. But that'd be my top two recommendations based on what I've just personally seen, through the years of trying to make people have a little bit of a leg up here. So.
The only other one I was going to add in there, Ken, that's another CPE tip, is that whole idea of standardized proposal forms. And as a simple example of that, we hear over and over again from vendors, just when we ask for basic things like resumes or minimum quals or other basic experience, past performance type of things, the more we make that standardized, it's a fill in the blank type of box, and they don't have to go from scratch. If there are certain things that we want to see, just let them know, organize it that way. I've universally heard the vendor community say it's nice when we fill that in, knowing that that's what the client wants to see, and just those other little things, to Ken's point.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at in my mind, where I've kind of settled, having done this several times over the years, is the fundamental purpose of the solicitation truly is to allow those with the greatest competitive advantage, with the most expertise and the highest level of risk, either elimination or absorption, to more effectively differentiate themselves from their competition. I've been in many meetings over the years where you will see a proposal come in and you'll go through a traditional procurement process and you kind of know there's no way the vendor can do it, but the client hopes for the best and hires them anyway. And then you're debriefing the losers and they have a basic idea of what has transpired. And the high performing vendors, they know the client just signed up for something that's impossible. Like, it's not going to happen. And they already know it, but the client may have to wait 2 years before they realize it. And they know that if you have a bad experience with a low performing vendor, one of their competitors, you will actually be a harder client to work with the next time they engage with you, because you've had a bad experience. You'll typically adjust your contract language, make it more restrictive, more punitive, because we think sometimes if we make the contract scarier, then people will start trying to do their jobs better. So the goal of the solicitation is, have we made it in a fair, legal fashion, an environment that will allow those who have more capability, more expertise, to more clearly differentiate themselves from their competitors in our evaluation process. And if the solicitation can accomplish that, and how we evaluate, as Brian mentioned, some of these standard submissions, then we're going to have higher performance inside of our organization. And if we're hiring higher performing teams from the marketplace, then the skill sets of our internal people will automatically increase, because now they're working with experts. And so their skills are going to start to mirror theirs, and it raises the whole organization to higher levels. But that all starts with the solicitation. So, but thank you for that question, Victor.
I'll just go ahead and throw a question out here. I know several of our attendees today, Don and Lori, they work or involved with school districts. And as we know, that public school fundings has historically been lacking in terms of some of the things that need to be done. So Ken, I'm wondering if you can comment on how might this advanced approach, when we're not just focused on low price, how does that work in environments when there's not a lot of money available in the first place?
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I can give a real example of that. We were working with the state parks organization. So they have less than no money. And they had a very limited budget to do some preservation work on a historical site within their state. It was like an old Western kind of community, and the state ran it and everything. And they had originally put together the scope of work, prioritize the projects, develop some budgets. And then we were engaged with the state, and then we kind of bumped into this group. And so we had a couple meetings, and what we'd proposed was, let's just open it up and let's let the vendors compete and lay out and just say, here's how much money we have. Here's all the things we think are wrong with our, need to be fixed and updated and corrected or revised at this park, this historical site, and just let the vendors prioritize it. Let them tell us what needs to be done first, create the plan of how to do it versus us mandating everything. Let's just, if they've got expertise, because the state hadn't done a lot of this. Their people were good, hardworking, but their level of expertise in historical preservation was minimal. And so that's what we did. We created a solicitation, and the submission was the plan. And then we had a robust interview process, and we had basically a 2-phaser. But what happened was, as a vendor came in, and it really came down, there was 2 people on this one team that really knew what they were doing. And that's what we were looking for. Like, there are experts out there. You just got to get them to come on your project. And so they came in, they laid out everything out. They went to the site multiple times, took pictures. This is all during the proposal process. Laid out the entire plan. They said, here's where you should allocate your money, and here's the order of precedence. And since there's a lot of things we don't know yet, when we start to uncover things, we're going to learn more about what the current condition is. So they put in ranges. They said, if we find this condition, then we can do these additional projects. But if we find this level of deterioration and rehabilitation's needed, then we won't be able to do as much. And they had the entire plan laid out. And it was a 3-year project, and they just started going through piece by piece exactly to their plan. And when they found something that was in the favor of the state, like it wasn't as bad as it could have been, then additional money was, and we kept it in a pot and a little bit further. And then if they found another good thing, then you'd actually add on projects, add on a little bit more rehabilitation. But that entire plan, entire scope of work basically came from the vendor community. So if you don't have money, right, and you have more needs than you have resources, let the vendors know the needs, let them know the resources, and then leverage the expertise that exists in the market to say, this may be the best way to allocate your resources across your needs based upon their expertise. And you don't even have to listen to them, but it at least gets you some insight from what the experts and the vendor community may be thinking, that maybe your internal personnel either haven't done it before, or made a mistake, or don't have as much insights or experience as some other individuals may have that exist in the marketplace. So, it depends what you're trying to buy. And everyone has that problem. Like, that's not a unique problem to school districts, to be honest with you. The needs are higher than the resources. But within that, how to allocate the resources you do have across the needs that are there. You can either do that in a phase fashion to, like, let's have someone just assess the need structure, like a consultant, or you can put it all in one package, save yourself some money, and have the team come in and do it. Again, that's a general question, but sure, you have to look at the specifics of it. But that's where we've done that before. That takes training, though. It takes structure. You have to have some process around that, because you do have some risk when you open that up that much to the vendors. So your procurement process needs to be really dialed in to make sure you get the right people on board to help you truly, minimize your constraints inside as an organization.
Great, thank you, Ken. Don, did you have a question or comment?
I did. I just wanted to, you had mentioned making sure that you hired an expert. How do you go about the hiring of the expert? We have a lot of people that say that they're experts, and then, and then to the point at where they're degrading other people who could actually be an expert.
Yep.
So would you suggest doing an RFQS? Would you suggest doing some kind of proposal that comes in? How are you making that determination?
Yeah, so the XPD process has a robust structure to it, and then specific tools and pieces based upon the situation of what you're trying to procure. But you are absolutely correct. When you ask, basically an RFX, whatever your solicitation is, what it's really asking is, who's the best in the world for this? And every vendor's marketing team and sales team comes in and says, we're the best in the world, right? And so, that's hard to differentiate. When you're looking at the individual people, it typically minimizes the criteria necessary to evaluate the competitors versus if you're looking at the companies. A lot of times we will see where the solicitation is more focused on the company, especially from a financial risk, like if they mess up, do they have the financial capacity to pay us back kind of risk. They'll look more at the company, the marketing, the background, but the company exists on paper, but it's not a thing, it's not a person. So the more quickly the requirements focus on the individuals and whatever it is they're trying to sell you, that will immediately make your evaluation and differentiation of the potential experts easier. So that's the first step, just focus on the people. So then how do you focus on the people? Well, you have to do it quickly and you have to do it efficiently. There's two main ways that we can focus on people. One is who they say they are, which is their past performance. And the other is what they say they can do. And that's going to be a written proposal. And then you can talk to them in an interview. So that's the two linkages and the kind of the three pieces that we have. We can look at who they are and past performance. The problem with past performance, though, is that it's not going to help you differentiate. It will only filter, but it will not differentiate those that have been filtered. So what I mean by that is if you're asking for performance metrics, there will automatically be people inside the companies that the vendors will not even submit to be on the team because they won't have enough references to be competitive. So the ones you're going to get are going to at least have the 3 to 5 references, and they're only going to pass in good ones, right? No one's going to pass in a bad reference. They don't do that. So your past performance does not differentiate, it only filters. So that's not going to help you compare the experts. They're all going to have good numbers. The next two pieces are going to be the written proposal and the interview. The written proposal, you don't know who wrote it, right? They could have had an expert write it, and then they're going to send someone who didn't have any idea what they wrote to be on your project. So that's not going to help you either. So the proposal is necessary to potentially shortlist. So it's a differentiating tool. Within that proposal, typically we're looking at 3 things in addition to whatever else you want to look at. And these 3 are all that's necessary, but the transition to a more robust procurement process, or more sleek, I guess you would say, maybe not robust. It takes time to get comfortable with it. That's what I've noticed. But in general, you want to know what their plan is, right? How are they going to do what you need them to do? And it's usually a short document, 1 or 2 pages, and very specific. And they have to provide some guidance in the solicitation for that. The second is what I talked about very briefly in my deck, which was what risk do they see that they do not control that can keep them from successfully executing their plan? Right? And that plan could be an installation, a delivery, a project, a transition. There's a lot of things the plan may be. I'm using that term generically. But what risk do they see that can keep them from being successful? That's a huge differentiator. The ability to identify, prioritize, and then lay out a plan to minimize risk from occurring. Experts, because they have the capability and the experience, will be able to speak in terms of the written submission. They'll be able to communicate that very specifically to your actual upcoming project, almost like they've already done it before. And that's what they're doing. They're actually delivering it in their minds. They will be very specific. Someone who lacks expertise will only be able to speak in generalities. So we do evaluator training. And one of the things you're looking for is a potential sign of expertise is that they can be very specific to your upcoming need, what you're actually procuring. Where if someone lacks expertise or has less expertise, they will only be able to speak in generalities. They'll say, oh, communication's a risk. Oh, coordination's a risk. We have to do all these, we have to I mean, it'll be very, almost like a marketing person wrote it who doesn't have a lot of technical background in what you're buying. The other written piece is the value plan or the value added proposition. And what we're looking for there is we've seen and measured that experts have the ability to place themselves in the client's perspective and say, if I were the client and this was my money, would I do anything differently than what the solicitation and its statement of work has required me to do? And they can give you ideas, and I've got a whole deck on just these things, but ideas, options, things to add, delete. Now, you don't have to do any of them, and it's not included in their price, but it's a way to differentiate potential expertise. So that written piece is the second component. You have the past performance, you have the written piece, which can consist of a plan, a risk approach or a risk assessment, and then a value added or a value assessment. So that's the three pieces we've seen. And we have templates and all this and training for all these things, but the vendors have to be trained because it's a different way of thinking for some of them. And the evaluators have to be trained. And now we've measured how vendors create their proposal responses. And it's very interesting. All the high performers do it exactly the same way, regardless of industry. They first identify the right people for the project. Next, they put them in the room, lay out the need, and they say, if this were you, how would you deliver it? Lay out the plan. Now, within your plan, what risks do you see? Within those risks, what would you change if you were the client, if it was you doing it versus what the clients asked you to do? They're already doing that. We're actually trying to build a procurement process that models how experts think, behave, and perform. And that's what we've been doing. And I think in all aspects we have done. Now, the third piece is interviews. Now, interviews are recommendations based on what we've seen and how we run it when we run it. One, they come in by themselves. It is not a group. It's not a team. You're interviewing a project manager or a tech lead or an analyst, whatever you're trying to hire, they come in and there could be 3 or 4 key people on the team you're going to interview for each competitor. Each person from each team comes in by themselves individually. So if you're interviewing 3 people per firm, then there'd be 3 separate interviews. You bring them in. As you get better at it, it only takes about half an hour. When you start, you'll want to do everything, so you'll want to go longer. But as you get proficient in what we're recommending, you'll get more comfortable in it. You bring them in. The first question I recommend you ask is, why did your company send you here today? That's the first question I would ask someone, and that's in our recommended list. Number 1, why did your company send you here today? Most common answer we get is, I don't know, I was told to come. Second most common answer we get is, I'm coming off a project and I'm available, right? I'm wrapping up with another client, so I'm next, right? There's no consideration of expertise in this company's assignment of its personnel. That's a warning sign. Next question. And well, there's a few questions, but main question, I'm taking too long on this. I'm sorry, Jay, cut me off if you need me to. Main question. If you're in a room with a whiteboard, that's the best. And if it's virtual, if it's Zoom, use the whiteboard feature, whatever you need to do. Or I've seen them hold a piece of paper up to a camera the last year and a half, whatever works. Give them a marker and a whiteboard or something equivalent and say, go up to the board. I recommend you make them stand up. Make them get up there, stand up at the whiteboard, lay out how you're going to deliver this service, whatever it is you're buying, install this software, whatever it is you're buying, in major milestone activities with your approximate durations. No notes. They can't bring notes in. Now, some clients let them, but I recommend you don't. Let them get up there. And what we've seen is experts have already executed the work in their mind. They can already see it. Non-experts cannot do that. Experts will get up there, they'll lay out the major activities with just simple bar chart, nothing fancy. You let them lay it out. This will take 3 months. We'll start this here, take about 4 months. And I've seen some where they have like a 100-line schedule. And we're like, well, that's enough detail, slow down. We don't want to go for an hour just on the schedule. So you got to kind of gauge it. Next question, on their milestone chart, on their plan, their schedule, where do they have concerns that risk may occur or an event may occur that could impact their approach? And they all know it, like the experts know it. They know what usually goes wrong when. They can lay that out oh, this may happen here. I need your decision here. This could be delayed. We're waiting on this product to come over from overseas, whatever it is, right? Whatever the risks are. Then you ask them, with those risks, what are you going to do to keep those from happening if we hire you? And if they do happen, despite your best efforts, what will you do to minimize the impact to us, the client? And just see what they say. The last question you say, now in your plan, what do you need from us? What can we do as a client to make you more successful? An expert can answer all those questions quickly without notes. They know what they're doing. Over half the people you ask to get up to a whiteboard and lay out what they're going to do before they do it, and like they're basically their order of actions they're going to do, over half the people you give a marker to in a whiteboard, they will go up, draw a couple lines, put the marker down, come back to the table, sit down, and just start talking again. They can't see it. They just have to keep talking, hoping they say some words you like to hear. And so that is how you can begin to differentiate expertise. Measure their past performance, ask them what their plan is, what risk they see, what value they could create or adjust, and then get them in a room by themselves without their boss there and have them lay out how they're going to do it, what they're going to do for you, what risk they see. And if someone can think and they can see it and they seem like they have a good intentions, then you've got high potential. You might hire an expert, and hopefully you can afford them. Hopefully their price is the right price. And you know, nothing feels worse knowing you have an expert in your midst, but you can't afford them. That really is not fun, because you're hiring someone you know is not as good, but at least you know what you're getting. And I actually had an initiative for a while. It fell apart because no one wanted to do it, but maybe someone on this call wants to do it. I wanted to have adaptive contracting. I think the contract should match who you're hiring. Some people you can give more control to. Others, if they don't have the skill, you got to keep more control back to yourself as the client. But the contract right now is just fixed regardless of who you're hiring. I don't think that may necessarily be the best case to do it. But anyway, that was a long answer, but that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Great, thank you, Ken. Don, hopefully that helped answer your question. Feel free to jump in here if you have any more clarifying questions. We got time for 1 or 2 comments or questions. Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question before the one that I really want to ask, just because you talked about interviews. What's your school of thought on interview questions? Share in advance or reveal at the time of the interview?
We've done it both ways. You will get different answers from different people on my team. I like sharing them in advance. I would put them right in the solicitation, because if you share them and they still can't do it, that sure helps you minimize your risk. If you share them and they sound like a robot, that sure helps you minimize your risk, because that means they don't know it. If you share it and they come in polished and they know what they want, and it gives you a clearer picture of what you're actually buying. So, I mean, the advantages of not sharing is just seeing if they can think on their feet. And and that does have merit. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't have any value. You're just trying to weigh the benefits, right? And so I've been in a lot of interviews. I mean, literally thousands. And it's not that hard to tell if someone knows what they're talking about. In my experience, it's not rocket science. If someone's a humming and an on and let me think. And I mean, and we've done where you let them bring in their notes, and they'll bring in some 3-inch binder. I mean, nothing's worse than someone having to check their notes to tell you how they're going to do their job. Like, if someone's got to check their notes to tell me how they're going to do their job, like, could you imagine going in for like surgery and the doctor's like, whoa, wait 1 second, hold on, I want to check the book real quick to make sure I do that. I mean, holy smokes. I mean, I don't want to get cut open by that person. So, I mean, you're looking for someone that just knows it. I mean, the word expert doesn't just mean more experienced, right? It doesn't mean older. It's not what I mean. It's really more of a processing capability inside the mind. They can consume information and assimilate it and organize it mentally to make very accurate, robust decisions in a quick, efficient manner. And not everyone can do that. Not every 45-year-old project manager for an IT company is equal just because they all have 20 years of experience at that point. It's just not the way it is. There are differences. And as a client, you're not trying to like save the whales. You're just trying to get a good team for one contract. and then rinse and repeat on the next procurement. You know, the saving the whales is for people like me in academia trying to, like, you know, move the industry. But if you're a procurement team, you know, I wouldn't want to give someone with no experience a chance to learn on my project, right? I mean, I know there's actions for that at a city level, but if all things being equal and it's a single procurement, and I'm like a client user about to hire a roofer, I don't want someone who's, you know, learning the ropes on my building. I'd want someone who's done it 1,000 times. So that's where it's at. But yeah, questions either way. I personally like sharing them because I think that it's a higher upside, lower downside, but there is a downside.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And Jake, for the time, I'm fine with that question being my last one. Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, folks, we probably have time for one more question. Anybody have any comments? Brian, I see you've come off mute here. Or I see Donna. Donna, Donna, go ahead.
This is probably going to be sort of an overview answer due to the time, but I was curious as to what are the logistics of actually receiving anonymous, 100% totally anonymous responses. I feel like that would potentially be challenging for suppliers to write. How do you, and what do you do when you receive responses that are not anonymous?
So it adjusts over time, but basically logistics of it are the procurement agent obviously knows who they are. So there's a submission form on top, right? So there's a submission form, you know who they are. All your standard stuff is there. All the things that you need in a normal procurement are there. The piece that's anonymous is the written proposal. And so the templates, the requirements are laid out in the solicitation, and we've developed all of that. But you know, there's a structure, and that's trained on what you're requiring as part of your pre-proposal meeting. And some projects we do too, because it's a big enough job. You want to attract and then train. So you may do 2 pre-proposal meetings, so they get the right people there for the second one. And so it is different. Now, once you do it enough as a client, especially in a given sector, it gets very efficient. But the first one's always more work. So the documents come in, the procurement agent knows who everyone is. They separate the documents, and then they just label them as vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, or 1, 2, 3, or they give them names, but something that's anonymous. So the evaluators don't know who wrote the proposal. Now, if that proposal comes in with markings or verbiage that gives away who it is, you typically will write in the document. We've seen it done multiple ways by procurement agents. If you're more merciful, you can let them resubmit, removing those portions. If you're less merciful, it's a non-responsive. And we've seen it both ways. In a market like we have now for most sectors, you'd probably be more merciful because you may not have as many competitors as you want. But as the economy slows and competition increases, you can be less merciful. So we've seen that both ways. So if they do make a mistake, we've also seen it where the procurement professional will go through and just black out anything that is a giveaway, with a PDF, right, or something like that. So that's how they come in anonymous. And so the evaluators don't see now, like the past performance comes in, it's not anonymous, but the evaluators don't get the past performance information. That's not even really evaluation, it's just plug and chug. And so that's validated and inputted. The evaluators assess the written proposal portions, whatever those may be. And I've given what we recommend, what we use, but you can have whatever you want. Those can be anonymous. That's a standard evaluation process. We have a specific evaluation process, but you evaluate those come in, enters into your matrix. And then the price is not typically analyzed. Sometimes it is, but the price gets plugged in, and then you shortlist. And the shortlisting, typically after shortlisting, you will reveal the names of the shortlisted vendors. Now, we've tried it different ways in COVID, but usually you'll say, here's the 3 shortlisted vendors, and here's the interview dates. And then they will know who's the interview, right? They'll know company A, B, C is in the interview, and they have their shirts on, and their hats on and everything. They give them the business card. So it's not anonymous at that point. But the initial evaluation of the proposal is anonymous. That's the only piece that's truly anonymous to the evaluator. So hopefully that answered your question.
Fantastic, thank you. I think last question, Brian, do you want to close us out here with a final comment or question here?
Sure. Yeah, I know we're out of time, so if folks have to drop, feel free. But Ken, the question I want to ask you is, you've mentioned clients being in competition with one another and that we want to hire experts. So it made me think of the question, how many experts are out there? In other words, how dire is this competition amongst owners? You know, are we at a 50% chance of getting one just if we do whatever we want to do, or what's that pool of expertise truly look like?
Oh, yeah. Behavioralists have measured all this. It's 7 to 12%, depending which study you look at. So 7 to 12% of a population in a skill function will be considered expert as measured by their peers. Now, they also have specific personality and aptitude traits. So we've gotten into psychological measurement, my team and I, over the years, because we noticed extremely similar just personality characteristics, attributes, behaviors in high performing experts and teams. And so it's not so random as one might think. There's not a lot of people with certain personality types that also have high technical expertise. And it depends what you're, it's by industry, right? So we've done like marketing, sports marketing for organizations, for sports groups. And yeah, an expert in that thing's like super gregarious, outgoing, mover, shaker. And that personality type would not be an expert in like IT coding, right? So it varies by function or skill set, but within the skill sets, it's usually pretty consistent of what the experts look like. So it's not so random. But yeah, the pool is 7 to 12%. So 1 out of 10.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.